The air smelled of cordite and burned oil, a bitter haze hanging over the shattered city as the SEAL team crouched behind the jagged concrete of a collapsed wall. The night sky flickered with distant explosions, dull flashes that painted their blackened faces in brief bursts of light. Lieutenant Commander Briggs pressed his back against the crumbling barrier, his rifle resting across his knees, every muscle in his body tight with readiness. He could hear his own heartbeat in his ears, loud against the silence that had settled over their position. The street ahead was a graveyard of twisted cars and scattered debris, illuminated only by the pale, flickering glow of a burning building half a block away. They were deep behind enemy lines, too far from support, and the extraction plan hinged entirely on a single call: clearance to move. Until that came through, they waited, silent as shadows, listening to the distant thunder of artillery. Briggs checked his men one by one. Rivera knelt with his M4 braced on a chunk of rubble, eyes fixed down his scope. Parker, their breacher, crouched behind him, fingers drumming restlessly against a pouch of explosives. Garrison, their sniper, lay prone on a ledge above, his rifle trained on the road ahead, his breath steady in Briggs's earpiece. And then there was Harris, the youngest, barely 23, crouched low, trying to look calm. They had been waiting for almost 2 hours, pinned in this alley, their objective, a fortified enemy comms hub, still intact 2 streets over. Intel had been wrong. The enemy presence was heavier, better organized, and now reinforcements were moving into the district. The SEALs were ghosts in the ruins, but ghosts could only linger so long before they were found. Briggs keyed his mic. Razor 2-1, status check. A crackle of static. 2-1 copies, came the soft reply from their Overwatch team miles away, voice tight but calm. No go for movement. Drones are still tracking armor in your sector. Recommend you hold. Briggs's jaw tightened. Hold. That was all they'd been doing. He exhaled slowly, scanning the rooftops. Copy. Holding. Rivera glanced back, his expression barely visible under his night vision goggles. Sir, we're burning time. Briggs didn't answer right away. He knew Rivera was right. Every minute they waited increased the chance that enemy patrols would sweep this block, and their escape route would vanish completely. But without air clearance, they'd be cut down if they tried to move now. He shifted his rifle and looked up at the sky, where the low hum of jets occasionally trembled through the night. Somewhere out there, in the darkness above, a strike package was circling, waiting for the green light. Briggs thought of the plan, the one they'd rehearsed a dozen times. The airstrike to clear the courtyard, their breach through the shattered compound walls, the exfil down the riverbed. It was all clockwork, until the higher-ups froze everything. The operation wasn't scrubbed, but no one was saying why the strike hadn't been authorized yet. Briggs hated waiting. Waiting got men killed. He glanced at Harris, who was shifting slightly, his nerves showing despite his training. Briggs tapped his shoulder, a silent reminder, stay calm. Harris nodded, sucking in a slow breath. The distant growl of an engine drifted down the street, low and heavy, echoing off the hollowed-out shells of buildings. Garrison's voice came through the comms. Armor north end. Looks like a BTR moving slow. Briggs's grip tightened on his rifle. The BTR would roll right into their sector if it kept its course, and with thermal they wouldn't stand a chance of staying hidden. 2-1, we're gonna lose this position, Briggs whispered into his mic. The voice on the other end came back strained. Negative movement. I repeat, no movement until further clearance. Strike assets are complicated right now. Complicated. Briggs bit back a curse. Higher command was hesitating over politics, over intel, over whatever chessboard they were playing miles away, while his men crouched here on the edge of death. Copy, he said tightly. He signaled his team. They shifted deeper into cover, hearts pounding in unison as the BTR's engine noise grew louder, the vehicle's hulking silhouette soon appearing at the end of the road. The beam of a spotlight swept lazily across the rubble, and Briggs prayed it wouldn't land on them. Rivera's finger hovered near his trigger, his breathing slow. Parker's hands tensed around the detonator he carried, in case they needed to take the BTR out the hard way. Briggs's heart hammered against his ribs. Then the spotlight passed over, skimming their alley but not stopping. The BTR rumbled by, treads grinding over debris, until it disappeared into the night. The tension in Briggs's body didn't ease. If armor was moving through here, enemy infantry wasn't far behind. The distant buzz of drones filled the air, circling overhead like vultures. Garrison spoke again, his voice barely a whisper. Movement, east side. Foot patrol, squad-sized. Briggs gritted his teeth. We're boxed in. The mission had already gone sideways, But this was about to turn into a bloodbath if something didn't change fast. His earpiece crackled suddenly, a different voice cutting through. "Razor Actual, this is Hawkeye. We're on station but we're dark. Repeat, dark." Briggs froze. "Hawkeye." That was the call sign for their close air support package, an A-10 squadron. But why dark? He keyed his mic. "Hawkeye, Razor Actual. Confirm you're on station." "Affirm," came the voice, calm and steady, the kind of tone only a seasoned pilot had. "We're running hot, but higher hasn't cleared us." "You boys in a bad way?" Briggs glanced at his team, the fear in Harris's eyes, Rivera's clenched jaw. "We're about 30 seconds from compromised." Silence for a beat, then the pilot's voice came back, quiet but with an edge. "Copy that. Mark your position. Stay put." Briggs hesitated. "You cleared to engage?" The pilot chuckled dryly. "You didn't hear me, Razor? We're dark. Burn your laser now." Briggs's pulse spiked. Dark meant unauthorized. It meant this pilot was about to go rogue. He grabbed his laser designator and flicked it on, painting the enemy position ahead. "Marked," he whispered. The next sound was a scream of engines, a noise so guttural and raw it seemed to tear the night apart. The A-10 came out of nowhere, diving low from the black sky like a predator striking prey. Briggs caught a glimpse of it through the haze, gray, scarred, its tail number scorched black as if someone had tried to erase it from existence. "Brace!" he barked, shoving Harris down as the Warthog's Gu-8 Avenger cannon roared. The sound was deafening, a ripping mechanical growl as streams of 30mm rounds ripped through the street ahead, shredding armor and concrete alike. The BTR never had a chance. It exploded in a fireball that lit the night like a second sun. Enemy soldiers dove for cover, but the A-10 was merciless, circling and strafing again, each pass precise, brutal. The SEALs hugged the ground, shockwaves rattling their teeth as debris rained down around them. Harris's breath came in ragged gasps, and Briggs grabbed his shoulder, holding him steady. The pilot's voice crackled in their ears again, calm as ever. "Clear for movement, Razor. Corridors open. Clocks ticking." Briggs peeked over the rubble, the once dangerous street now a smoking ruin, enemy positions obliterated. "Move!" he barked, and his team flowed out of cover like water, sprinting toward their objective while the A-10 banked overhead, a guardian angel cloaked in fire and smoke. The SEALs moved as one, their boots pounding against cracked pavement, rifles raised, every sense sharpened by adrenaline. The A-10's cannon fire had left the street ahead a jagged wasteland, smoke curling from shattered vehicles and pulverized walls. They slipped through it like phantoms, every step calculated, eyes scanning for movement. Briggs led the way, his pulse steady despite the chaos. 2-1, we're advancing, he whispered into his comms. The reply came quick and tense. "Copy, Razor. Corridor clear for 30 seconds. Enemy response incoming." 30 seconds. That was all the time they had before reinforcements regrouped. Briggs pushed harder, signaling with a clenched fist. Rivera and Parker flanked right, Harris followed tight behind Briggs, and Garrison ghosted across the rooftops, his long rifle covering their approach. The enemy comms hub loomed in the distance, a fortified 3-story building with reinforced windows and sandbagged positions. It was their primary target. Destroy it and the entire enemy battalion's coordination would collapse. Briggs scanned the area ahead. The Warthog's strafing runs had shredded most of the exterior defenses, but the enemy wasn't stupid. They'd be regrouping inside, likely waiting for a counterstrike. He motioned for Parker, who immediately swung his pack around and started prepping breaching charges. "Harris, cover rear," Briggs ordered. The rookie nodded, spinning on his heel to watch the smoking corridor they just sprinted through. Rivera crouched next to Briggs, his weapon steady. "Sir, they're gonna come down on us hard. That A-10 won't stick around forever." Briggs gave him a sharp nod. "That's why we move fast." He tapped his earpiece. "Hawkeye, Razor. We're a target. Keep eyes on us." The pilot's voice came back, calm and confident. "Roger, Razor. You get in trouble, just say the word." Parker moved quickly, planting a string of explosives along the doorframe, his gloved hands working with precision despite the chaos around them. Garrison's voice cut in from above. "Contact 2 blocks east, technicals moving fast." Briggs cursed under his breath. Technicals meant enemy pickup trucks with heavy machine guns. Reinforcements were already en route. He gestured at Parker, who gave him a thumbs up. "Breach set." Briggs motioned them back, then keyed his mic, "Fire in the hole." The explosion shattered the night, a deafening crack as the door blew inward. Dust and smoke billowed out. "Go." Briggs barked and Rivera surged forward, clearing the entryway with swift, practiced movements. Gunfire erupted immediately. Rivera fired 3 sharp bursts, dropping an enemy fighter before diving for cover inside. Briggs followed, his rifle snapping to his shoulder, muzzle flashes lighting the darkness as they pushed through the narrow hallway. Harris was right behind him, his breathing heavy but controlled. The building was chaos. The enemy had fortified the interior, turning every corner into a choke point. Briggs and his men moved like liquid, clearing room after room with brutal efficiency. Rivera's rifle barked, Parker tossed a flashbang that detonated with a bone-rattling crack, and they stormed forward. An enemy fighter lunged from a side door, rifle raised, but Harris reacted instantly, putting 2 rounds into the man's chest. The soldier crumpled, and Harris froze for half a second, eyes wide at his first confirmed kill. Briggs grabbed his shoulder, shoving him forward. "Stay sharp." The rookie blinked, nodded, and moved on. They reached the main operations room, a wide space filled with overturned tables, radio equipment, and bodies of enemy operators scrambling for weapons. Rivera dropped 2 before they could fire. Parker kicked over a chair, took cover, and started planting demolition charges along the primary comms racks. 30 seconds. Parker called. Briggs covered him, laying down precise fire to keep the enemy pinned. Garrison's voice came through the comms again. "Multiple contacts inbound on your position. 2 squads north and west. You got maybe 1 minute." Briggs didn't reply, he didn't need to. Time was already running out. He glanced at Harris, who was holding the door, his rifle trembling slightly but steady enough to drop a fighter trying to rush in. Briggs gave him a nod of approval. "Charges set." Parker shouted, slamming the final detonator into place. Briggs motioned for the team to move. Exfil. They surged back the way they came, ducking behind walls and overturned tables as bullets shredded the air around them. Harris nearly tripped over a body but caught himself, firing blind around a corner to keep their pursuers back. Parker shoved him forward, and they burst out into the alley just as the warthog screamed overhead again, a sound so loud it felt like thunder in their bones. "Hawkeye Razor. We need cover now." Briggs barked into his mic. The reply came instantly, "You got it. Stay low." The A-10 dove like a predator unleashed, its cannon lighting up the night with a storm of fire. Enemy reinforcements poured into the street, but they were cut down instantly, the aircraft's 30mm rounds tearing through vehicles, walls, and fighters alike. The SEALs sprinted through the chaos, smoke and sparks raining around them as the warthog carved a path of destruction overhead. Briggs glanced up just long enough to see the aircraft banking hard, its scorched tail number barely visible through the haze. Whoever this pilot was, they weren't just good, they were legendary. 2-1 package is hot. "Repeat, package is hot," Briggs said, breathless as they reached a crumbling wall at the edge of the street. Garrison had already repositioned, providing cover fire from above as the team vaulted over debris. "Copy Razor. Extraction point is 4 blocks south. You're green." Briggs motioned for the team to keep moving. The charges in the comms hub detonated behind them, a massive explosion lighting up the night sky. The building's roof collapsed inward with a roar, sending a shockwave that rattled windows for blocks. The enemy's command structure was gone, and chaos would ripple through their ranks within minutes. But chaos wouldn't stop the fact that the SEALs were deep in hostile territory with reinforcements closing in. "Move, move, move," Briggs ordered, his voice sharp as they darted through alleyways, cutting across abandoned courtyards and ducking under blown-out archways. Harris's chest heaved, but he kept pace, adrenaline keeping his legs moving. Rivera covered their rear, firing short bursts at shadowy figures moving in the smoke. Parker checked their path ahead, signaling clear. The A-10 roared overhead again, strafing another street where enemy technicals had been maneuvering to cut them off. Its cannon fire ripped through the vehicles, flipping one onto its side, flames erupting. Briggs glanced up just in time to see the jet climb hard, banking sharply as tracer fire reached up from hidden anti-air positions. "Hawkeye, they've got man-pads," Briggs shouted into his comms. "Yeah, I see him," came the comm response. A second later, the Warthog's nose dipped, and a pair of rockets streaked down, obliterating the enemy position with surgical precision. The jet screamed overhead, impossibly low, then vanished into the night again, leaving only echoes and fire behind. They reached the extraction point, a narrow courtyard near a shattered fountain, and hunkered down, rifles aimed at every entrance. Briggs keyed his mic. "Razor 2-1, we're at Exfil. Where's our ride?" Static answered at first, then the voice of their overwatch came back. Inbound, 60 seconds. Hold tight. 60 seconds. In a war zone, it might as well have been an eternity. Rivera crouched low, scanning his sector. "We're gonna have company," he muttered. He was right. Shadows moved at the far end of the courtyard. Enemy troops were closing in, drawn by the firefight and explosions. Briggs clenched his jaw. They had no choice but to hold this position. "Set perimeter," he ordered. Parker moved to cover the west side, Harris took the south, Rivera stayed east, and Garrison climbed to a low rooftop for overwatch. The rookie's breathing was loud in Briggs's earpiece, but his rifle was steady. Then Briggs heard it, a deep, rhythmic thump-thump-thump echoing through the night. Rotor blades. Extraction was coming. The rhythmic thump of rotor blades grew louder, vibrating through the shattered courtyard as dust and debris swirled in the night air. Briggs crouched low behind the remains of a stone planter, scanning the shadows beyond the courtyard walls. "Eyes up," he murmured into comms, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. Rivera's voice crackled back, calm and sharp. "Movement east, 3 tangos, closing fast." Briggs raised his rifle and peered through his scope, catching the faint glow of muzzle flashes as enemy troops moved into position. He squeezed off 2 controlled bursts, dropping one, forcing the other 2 into cover. Gunfire erupted around them, echoing between crumbling buildings, the sharp crack of rifles and the heavier thud of enemy weapons mixing into a chaotic symphony. Harris, crouched near the fountain, flinched at a burst of fire that shattered the ground near his feet, but he quickly regained his composure, returning fire with precision that belied his inexperience. Briggs allowed himself a fleeting moment of pride. The kid was green, but he was proving himself tonight. "Razor, this is 2-1. Bird is inbound, 60 seconds out." "Hot LZ," their overwatch reported, their voice tight with urgency. Briggs didn't need to be told it was a hot landing zone. The entire courtyard was about to become a killing field. He scanned upward as the helicopter appeared through the smoke, its shadow looming large against the glow of burning buildings. A Black Hawk, sleek and fast, rotors cutting through the haze like a blade. The bird's side doors were already open, a crew chief leaning out with a mounted M240, scanning for threats. "Hold your fire. Cover the bird." Briggs barked. Rivera shifted his fire to a new position, cutting down a fighter who was trying to line up a rocket launcher. The helicopter swooped lower, kicking up a storm of dust that stung Briggs's face and made his goggles useless. He yanked them off, blinking through the chaos, his ears filled with the roar of rotors and the deafening chatter of gunfire. Parker was crouched behind a low wall, firing short, controlled bursts to keep the enemy at bay. Garrison, from his rooftop perch, provided deadly overwatch, each shot from his sniper rifle precise, surgical, and final. The air was thick with tension, the kind of pressure that made every second stretch out like an eternity. Then, from above, that familiar, terrifying growl returned. Briggs instinctively ducked as the A-10 screamed overhead, impossibly low, its engines roaring like a demon unleashed. "Hawkeye's back on station." Briggs shouted into his mic, though his voice was nearly drowned out by the sound of the Warthog's Ju-8 Avenger spinning up. The cannon's roar was deafening, its recoil sending shockwaves through the air as streams of 30mm rounds carved through enemy reinforcements converging on the courtyard. Buildings crumbled, vehicles exploded, and enemy fighters scattered like ants under a magnifying glass. The A-10 banked hard, looping back around, its silhouette ghostly against the fiery sky. Briggs caught a glimpse of the scorched tail number again, barely visible like a war machine stripped of identity. Whoever that pilot was, they were rewriting the odds of survival. "Harris, move. Get to the bird." Briggs barked, signaling the youngest member of his team to make the sprint first. Harris hesitated only for a moment before dashing across the open courtyard, bullets snapping around him like angry hornets. The Black Hawk's crew chief laid down suppressive fire, his machine gun hammering at enemy positions as Harris dove into the open door of the bird. Parker followed next, sprinting low, his rifle spitting controlled bursts as he moved. Rivera and Garrison were still covering their sectors, the sniper calm and methodical even as tracer fire stitched the air near his perch. Briggs glanced upward, seeing Garrison reposition for a better angle. "Go!" Briggs shouted. Rivera broke from cover, sprinting with Parker's help, sliding into the Black Hawk's cabin just as the helicopter shifted slightly, preparing for takeoff. Briggs keyed his mic, "Garrison, time to go." The sniper acknowledged with a quick click over comms. Then he moved, dropping from his rooftop perch in a controlled slide, sprinting across the final stretch of open ground with enemy fire chasing his heels. Briggs covered him, his rifle on full auto for a brief, controlled burst that cut down two advancing fighters. Garrison leapt through the helicopter's side door, rolling smoothly as the crew chief reached out to pull him in. Briggs was the last man standing, crouched low, firing bursts at advancing silhouettes that seemed to multiply in the shadows. Razor move? Birds lifting. The pilot's voice was urgent, clipped. Briggs knew staying meant death. He pushed off from cover, sprinting flat out toward the helicopter, bullets tearing the air around him. The Black Hawk's engines roared as it rose slightly, straining to stay low amid the chaos. Briggs dove for the open side door, landing hard on the deck as Rivera and Parker grabbed his gear, yanking him inside. Clear. Briggs shouted. The crew chief gave the signal, and the Black Hawk surged upward, rotors chopping the air as tracer fire streaked toward them from all sides. The A-10 screamed past again, its cannon tearing into enemy positions, ripping apart the rooftops and alleys where gunfire had been coming from. The Black Hawk banked hard, engines whining as the pilot pushed it to maximum speed. Briggs slammed against the side of the cabin, his heart pounding in his chest as he caught glimpses of the ruined city below, streets glowing with fire, buildings reduced to rubble, bodies scattered in the chaos. The mission was technically over, but the danger was far from gone. Birds taking hits, the crew chief yelled, his voice almost lost in the deafening roar of gunfire. Briggs looked up to see sparks flying off the Black Hawk's side as rounds from below stitched across the fuselage. The pilot jerked the helicopter into evasive maneuvers, zigzagging between ruined high-rises to avoid enemy fire. Garrison braced himself against the doorframe, his sniper rifle now a makeshift countermeasure as he took shots at enemy gunners below. Rivera crouched beside him, firing bursts from his M4, helping keep heads down. Harris was pressed against the cabin floor, eyes wide, clutching his rifle as though it were the only thing holding him together. Briggs keyed his mic again, calling out to their guardian angel in the sky. Hawkeye Razor. We're airborne but taking fire. Can you cover? The pilot's voice came back, calm, unwavering. Copy, Razor. Keep flying straight. I've got you. A moment later, the Warthog dove into the streets behind them, its cannon blazing again, cutting off pursuing fighters with a wall of destruction. The enemy gunfire thinned immediately, their anti-air teams scrambling for cover as the A-10 unleashed hell on their positions. Briggs felt the tension in his chest ease slightly, though he knew it wasn't over yet. The Black Hawk broke free of the worst of the city's chaos, rising higher as the pilot maneuvered them toward friendly lines. The rhythmic thump of the rotors was deafening, the cabin vibrating with every hard turn. Briggs glanced around at his team. Parker was reloading calmly, sweat streaming down his face. Rivera gave Briggs a sharp nod, his usual stoic demeanor unshaken. Garrison was already scanning the skyline for potential threats, his sniper instincts never shutting off. Harris sat against the wall, helmet tilted back slightly, breathing hard but alive. Briggs met his gaze and Harris gave a shaky smile. "You done well tonight. Razor, we're almost clear of red zone," their pilot announced. Briggs let out a slow breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The tension of the mission, the waiting, the firefight, and the chaos of the extraction all weighed on him at once, but he pushed it aside. There would be time to process later. Right now their lives still hung in the balance. He keyed his mic once more. "Hawkeye Razor. We owe you one." The pilot's voice came back as calm and detached as if they weren't flying a death machine through hell itself. "Save it for later, Razor. Still work to do." As if to prove his point, tracer fire stitched the air near the Black Hawk again, forcing the pilot to bank sharply. The A-10 roared in response, swooping down for another pass. Briggs watched in awe as the aircraft dove straight into the danger zone without hesitation, obliterating the enemy positions threatening their escape. For a moment, the battlefield below looked like the surface of another planet, lit by fire and destruction, and above it all, that ghostly, nameless war machine circled like an avenging angel. The Black Hawk flew low and fast, skimming just above the rooftops as it tore through the ruined cityscape. The pilots pushed the bird to its limits, banking hard between half-destroyed buildings, rotors kicking up clouds of dust and smoke. Briggs knelt near the open door, one hand gripping a harness strap, the other clutching his rifle. The wind whipped at his face, carrying the acrid scent of burning fuel and gunpowder. His eyes scanned the ground below, catching flashes of movement in the shadows, enemy squads regrouping, vehicles pulling into defensive positions. The chaos they just escaped was spreading through the sector like wildfire. Garrison crouched beside him, rifle braced against the frame, eyes behind his scope as he tracked targets. "Technical west side," he muttered, his voice calm as ever. Briggs followed his line of sight, spotting a pickup truck with a mounted heavy machine gun barreling down a side street, trying to line up a shot on their bird. Garrison fired once and the gunner dropped instantly, slumping over the weapon. The truck swerved and crashed into a wall, flames erupting. Briggs gave Garrison a quick nod. The sniper barely acknowledged it, his focus already shifting to another threat. Inside the helicopter, Rivera and Parker sat back to back, rifles trained outward. Harris, though pale and wide-eyed, was holding steady, his M4 pressed against his shoulder. The rookie's knuckles were white on the grip, but his finger rested exactly where it should, poised but disciplined. Briggs leaned close to him, raising his voice over the deafening rotor wash. "You good, kid?" Harris gave a quick nod, swallowing hard. Yeah, I'm good." Briggs patted his shoulder once, a brief gesture of reassurance. Harris had earned it tonight. He wasn't a rookie anymore. The pilot's voice crackled in Briggs's headset. "Razor, we're skirting the edge of red zone. About 3 clicks from friendly lines, but I'm reading a lot of heat ahead." Briggs adjusted his grip on the harness strap, peering into the distance. Even through the smoke, he could see flickering lights ahead, enemy tracer fire streaking upward, searching the skies. "Copy," Briggs said. "We've got Hawkeye overhead." As if on cue, the familiar growl of the A-10 filled the night. The jet streaked past above them, a phantom in the smoke, its engines roaring like some vengeful beast. A heartbeat later, the sound of its Gu-8 Avenger cannon shattered the night. The pilot was carving a path ahead, eliminating anti-air positions with deadly precision. "God bless that pilot," Parker muttered as he watched explosions light up the skyline. The A-10 banked sharply, diving low over an enemy convoy trying to block their escape route. Its cannon fire shredded the lead vehicle and rockets followed, engulfing the street in fire. The helicopter shook slightly from the shockwave, but the path was open, for now. Briggs keyed his mic. "Hawkeye, Razor. Perfect work. Keep them off our 6. The pilot's voice came back, calm and clipped as always. "Stay on your heading, Razor. I've got you." The Black Hawk pushed forward, weaving between towering plumes of smoke. The enemy wasn't giving up easily. Small arms fire peppered the sky, tracers whizzing past the helicopter's fuselage. Briggs fired bursts into the shadows below, cutting down a squad trying to line up an RPG. Rivera joined him, his shots precise, efficient. "Left side clear," Rivera called, ducking back into the cabin to reload. Garrison shifted position, his sniper rifle cracking as he neutralized a second rocket team further downrange. "All clear," Garrison said calmly, as though he wasn't shooting under fire from a moving helicopter. Then the warning came. "Incoming 12 o'clock high." The crew chief's shout was nearly drowned out by the roar of the rotors. Briggs looked up just in time to see the faint smoke trail of a surface-to-air missile cutting through the sky toward them. The pilot jerked the Black Hawk hard to the right, the bird groaning under the strain. Flares popped from the helicopter, streaking downward in glowing arcs. The missile locked onto one of the flares and exploded in a burst of light just meters away, rattling the aircraft violently. Harris flinched, grabbing the side of the cabin, while Parker cursed under his breath. "More launch signatures," Garrison shouted, his voice sharp. Briggs' stomach tightened. They were flying through a kill box. "Hawkeye, Razor. We've got multiple launchers ahead." Briggs barked into his mic. The pilot's response was immediate, steel in his tone. "Copy. Mark targets." Briggs grabbed his laser designator and leaned out the side door, painting the rooftops ahead where the enemy launchers were firing. "Marked," he called. The A-10 responded with a roar, diving so low Briggs swore he could see the pilot's helmet glint in the cockpit. The Warthog unleashed its fury, its Gu-8 Avenger spitting streams of tungsten rounds that shredded the launchers in seconds. Rockets followed, striking enemy positions with pinpoint accuracy, turning rooftops into firestorms. The Black Hawk banked sharply again, the pilot pushing them through the narrow window Hawkeye had just opened. The city fell away beneath them, giving way to open ground scarred by weeks of fighting. Briggs felt his chest loosen slightly. They weren't safe, but they were closer. 2-1 Razor. "We're approaching your zone," Briggs said into his comms. "Copy, Razor," came the calm reply. "We've got eyes on you. Bring them home." The crew chief gave Briggs a quick thumbs up. Briggs looked back at his team, checking each man. Rivera, calm and ready. Parker, reloading again with smooth precision. Garrison, sniper rifle steady, scanning every shadow below. Harris, breathing hard but controlled, his eyes sharp now. They'd all survived hell tonight, and Briggs wasn't about to let anything take that from them. Then the helicopter jolted violently, alarms blaring. "We're hit!" the pilot yelled over comms. Smoke trailed from the tail rotor and Briggs's heart sank. "We're still flying but I don't know how long," the pilot added, his voice tight but composed. Briggs gritted his teeth. "Hawkeye Razor. We're damaged. Any chance of clearing a path faster?" The Warthog pilot's voice came back cold and steady. "Stay airborne. I'll clear everything between you and the LZ." And he did. The A-10 dove ahead of them, flying impossibly low, ripping apart every enemy position in their path. Briggs watched through the open door as the nameless jet painted the battlefield in fire, its tail number a charred, unreadable scar. Whoever that pilot was, they were doing more than just flying cover, they were risking everything to get this bird home. "Almost there," the Black Hawk pilot called, his voice straining as he fought to keep the damaged aircraft steady. Briggs gripped the side of the cabin, muscles tense, heart pounding. He could see the faint glow of their forward operating base ahead, a beacon of safety amid the destruction. But between them and salvation, tracer fire erupted again, streaking through the night like glowing spears. The A-10 banked sharply, its engines howling as it unleashed one final barrage, silencing the threat in a rain of destruction. The Black Hawk descended rapidly, smoke trailing from its tail. The crew chief signaled them to brace. Briggs grabbed a harness strap and shouted for his men to hold on. The landing wasn't smooth, it was a bone-rattling slam onto the tarmac, the bird bouncing once before the pilot wrestled it down. The second the skids touched solid ground, Briggs ripped off his harness. "Go, go, go," he yelled. The SEALs poured out of the Black Hawk, rifles raised, forming a defensive perimeter as medics and ground crew rushed in. Briggs turned back just in time to see the A-10 streak overhead, banking hard in a final pass before disappearing into the darkness. No radio call, no thanks. Just a ghost in the sky, leaving behind a trail of smoke and salvation. The rotor wash faded into the night as the Black Hawk powered down, smoke trailing from its damaged tail, mechanics and medics swarming around it like bees to a wounded hive. Briggs stood at the edge of the landing pad, his rifle slung over his shoulder, scanning the perimeter with sharp, restless eyes. The smell of scorched metal and jet fuel hung heavy in the air, mingling with the ever-present scent of dust and gunpowder. Behind him, his team regrouped, weapons lowered but still alert. Rivera leaned against a concrete barrier, his expression unreadable as he reloaded his rifle with mechanical precision. Parker sat on a crate, head tilted back, catching his breath as sweat streamed down his face. Garrison was already on one knee, breaking down his sniper rifle piece by piece, every movement calm and methodical, as if the chaos of the last hour had never happened. Harris stood apart from the group, helmet under his arm, his face pale but steady. His hands still trembled slightly, though he clenched them tight, forcing control back into his body. The base was alive with movement, soldiers rushing to and from bunkers, vehicles roaring down dirt roads, radios crackling with hurried chatter. The operation wasn't over for the larger force, enemy units were still pressing hard on other fronts. But for Briggs and his men, their part was finished. The destruction of the comms hub would cripple enemy coordination for days, maybe weeks. Briggs should have felt relief, but instead he felt an unease gnawing at the back of his mind. He turned his gaze upward, searching the sky where the A-10 had vanished moments ago. There was no sign of it now, just the pale glow of the moon through the haze of smoke and fire. The pilot hadn't said a word after that final pass, hadn't acknowledged their extraction or his role in saving their lives. It was as if he had been a ghost, one who came only to tip the scales of fate before vanishing again. A young airman approached, saluting sharply. "Sir, medics want to check you and your team." Briggs gave a curt nod. "We're fine." His voice carried a steel edge that discouraged further questions. The airman hesitated for a moment, then turned and hurried back toward the medics. Briggs exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders, feeling the ache of hours spent in armor, the adrenaline drain starting to hit him. Rivera came to stand beside him, his usual stoicism intact. "That pilot," Rivera said quietly, glancing toward the sky. "He wasn't on the roster, was he?" Briggs shook his head. "No. I've seen every flight plan, every CS asset assigned to this op, whoever that was, they weren't cleared to fly." Rivera smirked faintly, though there was no humor in it. "Damn good thing they ignored orders." Parker joined them, adjusting the sling on his rifle. "That tail number was burned off. Not just scratched, someone erased it." He spat into the dirt, his tone grim. "Means that jet's not supposed to exist. Or that pilot doesn't want anyone knowing he was there." Garrison, who had just finished packing away his rifle, looked up. "Whoever he is, he's the only reason we're breathing right now. Doesn't matter if he's a ghost." Briggs didn't answer, but his jaw tightened. He didn't like mysteries, especially ones that flew close air support like a surgical scalpel. Whoever that pilot was, they weren't just some rogue operator. They were trained, disciplined, and willing to go against orders to save a SEAL team pinned in a death trap. That kind of courage didn't come from nowhere. A jeep pulled up near the landing pad, a dust-covered staff sergeant stepping out. "Commander Briggs?" Briggs turned, nodding once. "Command wants a debrief. Now." Briggs glanced back at his team. They were exhausted, battered, but alive. He nodded for them to follow. As they climbed into the jeep, Harris hesitated for a moment, glancing back at the helicopter they'd barely escaped in. The tail rotor was scorched black, panels blown open, mechanics shouting orders as they scrambled to repair it. The rookie's eyes drifted skyward, searching for the shadow of the A-10. There was nothing there. The jeep rattled through the base, headlights cutting through the haze. Briggs sat in silence, his hands resting on his knees, his mind replaying every second of the mission. The ambush, the waiting, the tension as they crouched in that alley, the roar of the A-10's cannon ripping apart the night. The sound still echoed in his ears like distant thunder. Harris finally spoke, his voice quiet but clear. "Sir, that pilot, do we know who he is?" Briggs glanced at him, studying his young, battle-hardened face. "No," he said simply. "And I don't think we're supposed to." Harris swallowed hard but nodded, staring out at the dark horizon. The debrief tent was lit with harsh fluorescent lights, maps spread across tables, officers clustered around radios. Briggs and his men stepped inside and the noise died down for a moment. A colonel in a crisp, dust-streaked uniform gestured them forward. "Commander Briggs, hell of a night." "Sit." Briggs remained standing. "Mission accomplished. Target eliminated. But I want to know who the hell that pilot was." The colonel's expression didn't change. "Which pilot?" Briggs's eyes narrowed. "The 810. Burned tail number. Flew in dark. Saved our lives." The colonel folded his arms, his voice calm but firm. "No such aircraft was authorized in your AO tonight. We've reviewed all sorties. Closest A-10 package was 20 miles east, running support for another unit." Briggs felt a chill run down his spine. Then who the hell was flying cover for us? The colonel met his stare for a long moment, then shook his head. "Not your concern, Commander. You and your team did your job. That's all that matters." Briggs clenched his fists, biting back the retort on his tongue. He wasn't one to question orders or chain of command, but something about this didn't sit right. The colonel turned away, already dismissing him. "Get your men some rest. You'll redeploy in 48 hours. Briggs gave a tight nod and walked out, his team following silently. Outside, the base buzzed with activity, but a strange stillness lingered in Briggs's mind. Rivera fell into step beside him. "They're covering it up." Briggs didn't respond. Guy like that doesn't fly for glory. He doesn't fly for recognition. He flies because someone told him to be there. Someone way above that colonel. Briggs finally spoke, his voice low. Or maybe he wasn't told at all. They reached their barracks, a series of sandbagged huts lit by dim floodlights. The team filed inside, setting down gear, stripping off armor, cleaning weapons. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, gun oil, and exhaustion. Harris sat on his bunk, helmet in his lap, staring at nothing. Briggs crouched beside him. "You did good tonight," he said. Harris looked up, surprised. Briggs continued, "You kept your head. You held your position. Not everyone does that their first time under fire." Harris nodded slowly. "Thanks, sir." Briggs clapped his shoulder once and stood, moving to his own bunk. The night outside was quiet now, though distant artillery thumped like a heartbeat on the horizon. Briggs lay back, staring at the ceiling, listening to the steady breathing of his team as they drifted into uneasy sleep. His mind wasn't on rest, though. It was on the shadow in the sky, the warthog that had appeared out of nowhere and turned certain death into survival. He replayed the moment in his head, the jet diving through smoke, tail number erased, cannon fire tearing the enemy apart. Whoever that pilot was, they'd saved more than just lives tonight. They changed something. Briggs couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the last time he'd see that nameless ghost of a warbird. Dawn came slowly over the base, bleeding light through the dust and smoke that still clung to the horizon. The sun's first rays turned the sand a pale gold, revealing the scars of the previous night, craters from mortars, burned-out vehicles, and the blackened skeleton of a guard tower near the perimeter. Briggs woke early as he always did, pulling on his boots with mechanical precision. His body ached from the mission, but pain was just another part of the routine now. He sat for a long moment at the edge of his cot, staring at his rifle propped against the wall, before standing and stepping outside into the cool morning air. The base was quieter now, but tension still buzzed in the air like a live wire. Engineers were patching holes in the outer walls, guards rotated on high alert, and Humvees loaded with supplies rolled past, their tires grinding over broken gravel. Briggs watched it all with sharp eyes, hands resting on his hips. His instincts were screaming at him, though he couldn't put his finger on why. Something about last night felt unfinished, like a battle only half fought. Behind him, Harris emerged from the barracks, bleary-eyed but alert, helmet under one arm. He paused, seeing Briggs standing rigid and scanning the sky. "Morning, sir," Harris said cautiously. Briggs gave a small nod, not looking away from the horizon. "You sleep?" he asked. Harris shrugged. "Tried to. Kept hearing that gunfire in my head." He hesitated, then added, "I keep thinking about that pilot." Briggs finally turned to face him. The rookie's expression was a mix of awe and unease, the same look every soldier wore after surviving their first real taste of hell. "Good," Briggs said simply. "Means you understand how thin the line is." Harris frowned. "You think we'll find out who he is?" Briggs glanced at the sky again. "If he wanted us to know, we would have known by now." Rivera and Garrison joined them a few minutes later, weapons slung, their faces tired but ready. Parker stumbled out last, yawning, his usual grin nowhere to be found. The squad gathered instinctively, a quiet circle of battle-worn men in dusty gear. "Orders came through," Rivera said, handing Briggs a folded slip of paper. Briggs scanned it quickly. Their next stop was already in motion. 48 hours of rest had been cut to 12. They'd be rolling out tonight. "Where to?" Parker asked, rubbing his eyes. "Sector Delta. Deep sweep of a suspected enemy cache," Briggs replied. "High risk. Expect heavy resistance." "Great," Parker muttered. "Because last night wasn't enough of a party." Briggs ignored him, his mind already working the angles. Delta Sector was close to the zone where their mysterious pilot had appeared. Coincidence? He doubted it. He folded the paper and stuffed it in his vest, his jaw tightening. Something told him this mission wasn't just another sweep. By noon, the team was fully geared up, moving through the base's motor pool as mechanics worked frantically on armored transports. Harris adjusted his body armor, his hands still a little shaky, but his movements faster and more confident than before. Garrison loaded ammo crates with quiet efficiency, his eyes scanning the perimeter as if expecting trouble to come at any moment. Rivera checked their comms equipment, muttering under his breath as he fine-tuned the encrypted frequencies. Briggs moved among them, silent and watchful, like a hawk circling its territory. As they prepared to depart, Briggs spotted something unusual across the lot. A lone mechanic working on an A-10 Warthog tucked in the far corner of the runway. The aircraft looked older than any he'd seen in service, its fuselage weathered, patches of paint stripped down to bare metal. The tail number was gone, scrubbed clean just like the jet from last night. The mechanic glanced up briefly, meeting Briggs's gaze, then returned to his work without a word. Briggs felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He walked toward the plane, his boots crunching on gravel, his squad watching curiously but staying back. The mechanic, a wiry man in oil-stained coveralls, didn't acknowledge him until Briggs was a few feet away. "Help you, Commander?" the man said, his tone flat. "Whose bird is this?" Briggs asked, gesturing to the jet. The mechanic's eyes flicked up briefly, then back to his tools. "Doesn't belong to anyone. Old frame, parts stripped, out of commission." Briggs crouched slightly, inspecting the Warthog's cannon system. The barrels gleamed with fresh oil. "Doesn't look out of commission to me." The mechanic stopped working, finally meeting Briggs's eyes. There was something cold and calculating in his gaze. "You're asking questions you don't want answers to, Commander?" Briggs straightened, his hand resting on the strap of his rifle. "Someone saved my team last night. They flew this jet or one like it. I don't like not knowing who's watching my back." The mechanic smirked faintly, wiping his hands on a rag. "Then maybe you should start thinking about why they were watching your back." Before Briggs could respond, the man turned and walked away, disappearing into a hangar. Briggs stood there, jaw tight, staring at the Warthog. Its canopy was closed, the cockpit sealed, but the jet felt alive. Ready. As if it could roar into the sky at a moment's notice. He didn't like mysteries, but something told him that digging deeper would only lead to more questions. The convoy rolled out just as the sun dipped low, painting the desert in red and gold. The team rode in 2 armored vehicles, dust trailing behind them as they sped toward Delta Sector. Harris sat next to Parker, gripping his rifle tightly, his nerves buzzing. "You ever feel like someone's watching us?" Harris asked quietly. "All the time," Parker said without looking at him. "Usually because someone is." Briggs sat in the front seat, helmet on, scanning the horizon through the armored glass. The desert stretched endlessly, dotted with jagged rocks and occasional clusters of ruined buildings. Every shadow felt like a potential threat. He kept replaying the mechanic's words in his mind. "Think about why they were watching your back. That wasn't random. That meant intent." The convoy reached Delta Sector just as night fell, parking in the shadow of a crumbling village. Briggs gave silent hand signals and his men fanned out, weapons ready. The village was silent, wind whistling through shattered windows, sand piling up against doorways. They moved like ghosts, clearing building after building, finding nothing but dust and old bullet holes. "Empty," Rivera whispered over comms. "No signs of activity." "Stay sharp," Briggs replied. "They knew we were coming last time. They might be setting up another trap." As they advanced deeper into the village, Harris froze, spotting something glinting in the moonlight. A tripwire stretched across a doorway. He raised a fist, signaling the others to stop. Garrison moved forward, crouching low to inspect it. "Pressure charge," he muttered. "Triggered by the door. Whole building would have gone up." Parker swore under his breath. "They wanted us boxed in again." "Not happening," Briggs said. He glanced at the rooftops, his instincts screaming. "Eyes up. They're here." A burst of gunfire ripped through the night, rounds sparking against a wall inches from Rivera's head. The squad dove for cover, returning fire as muzzle flashes lit up the rooftops. Harris's heart pounded as he crouched behind a broken wall, firing in short, controlled bursts. The enemy was everywhere, shadows darting across rooftops, RPG trails streaking through the sky. Then through the chaos, Briggs heard it, the distant roar of jet engines. He looked up, scanning the dark sky, and his pulse quickened. A shape emerged from the clouds, low and fast, no lights, just a shadow cutting through the night. The familiar scream of a Ju-8 cannon split the air, and enemy positions erupted in explosions. The ghost pilot had returned. "Move!" Briggs shouted, rallying his men as the Warthog made another pass, its cannon fire precise, devastating. Harris stared upward in awe, the jet's silhouette illuminated by fire and tracer rounds. "It's him," he yelled over comms. "Keep fighting." Briggs barked, firing into the darkness. The battlefield lit up with chaos, but this time the squad wasn't running. They were holding their ground, emboldened by the unseen ally in the sky. Tracer fire cut through the darkness, streaking red and orange across the ruined village as Briggs's squad fought tooth and nail. The roar of the Ju-8 cannon shook the ground, deafening even through their comms. Chunks of stone and concrete exploded as the Warthog rained precise bursts down on enemy strongholds, giving the squad precious seconds to maneuver. Briggs slammed against a wall, switching magazines with practiced speed, his movements calm despite the chaos. Rivera, flank left. Harris, cover him. Garrison, set up the saw on that rooftop, now. "Yes, sir." Garrison barked, hauling the heavy weapon over his shoulder as he sprinted toward the nearest ladder. Harris and Rivera moved as a unit, darting through alleys as bullets ricocheted off the walls. Harris's breathing was heavy but his hands were steady. He wasn't the same rookie from a few weeks ago. "Covering fire," Parker shouted, leaning out from behind a crumbled doorway and unleashing a hail of rounds. Enemy fighters ducked back behind rubble, their ambush faltering under the combined weight of the squad and the mysterious jet overhead. The Warthog screamed past low, close enough that Harris swore he could see the faint outline of a helmeted figure in the cockpit before it banked sharply into the night. "They're retreating from the rooftops," Rivera called out over comms. Briggs didn't relax. Retreat often meant regroup. He signaled his squad to push forward, clearing alley after alley, their boots crunching over glass and debris. The air stank of gunpowder and burning fuel. Explosions echoed from the village's outskirts, where enemy reinforcements were trying to encircle them. Briggs scanned the rooftops, his instincts sharp, when a sudden streak of light cut across the sky, an enemy RPG. "Down," he roared. The rocket struck a nearby building, collapsing it in a spray of stone and dust. Harris was thrown backward, hitting the ground hard. He coughed, ears ringing, but Rivera grabbed him and yanked him to cover. "You good, rookie?" "Yeah," Harris gasped, clutching his rifle. "Stay sharp. It's not over." On the rooftop, Garrison had set up the saw, sweeping the upper levels with controlled bursts. "I've got movement," he yelled, sighting a group of insurgents trying to flank from the east. "Engaging." His gun roared and two figures dropped, their weapons clattering against the tiles. Briggs barked orders through comms, directing fire like a conductor commanding an orchestra. Parker tossed a grenade down an alley, the blast rattling windows and silencing another pocket of resistance. The Warthog swooped low again, its engines vibrating through the squad's bones. The cannon erupted, sending shockwaves through the narrow streets as more enemy positions were shredded. Harris peeked up just in time to see the jet pull a hard turn, impossibly tight, like the pilot had flown this same battlefield 100 times. "Who the hell is this guy?" Parker muttered, shaking his head as he reloaded. "Not our enemy," Briggs replied coldly. "That's all you need to know right now." Minutes stretched like hours. The firefight was brutal, but Briggs's squad had momentum now. The enemy fighters, once confident in their ambush, were breaking apart under the relentless assault from above. Explosions lit up the horizon as the Warthog hit another weapons cache, sending flames into the night sky. "Commander, perimeter's clear," Rivera reported, his voice steady but laced with adrenaline. "Good. Hold positions and watch for reinforcements." Briggs scanned the skyline looking for the jet. The roar of engines had faded, replaced by eerie silence. "He's gone," Garrison said quietly over comms. Briggs frowned. No way the pilot had just left. His gut told him they were still being watched. He signaled the squad to regroup, and one by one, his men gathered in the center of the shattered village, their armor scorched and dusty but their eyes bright. "Status?" Briggs asked. "Minor injuries, no fatalities," Rivera said, glancing at Harris, who was nursing a bruised shoulder but otherwise fine. "Ammo's low," Garrison added, slinging the saw over his back. "But we're good to exfil." Briggs nodded, taking a slow breath. The battle was over, for now. They moved cautiously through the outskirts of Delta Sector, the convoy meeting them at a prearranged point. As they loaded into the vehicles, Briggs lingered, scanning the dark sky. He felt the same tension he'd felt before the battle, a sense that they were being watched. Harris noticed him staring upward. "You think he's still out there?" Briggs glanced at him. "I know he is." The rookie hesitated, then said quietly, "Why would someone risk their life for us if they don't even want us to know who they are?" Briggs didn't answer right away. He climbed into the lead vehicle and motioned for Harris to follow. "Some debts don't need names," he said finally. "Some people just do what has to be done." Back at base, they were greeted by medics and engineers rushing to assess damage to the vehicles. The squad filed into the armory, unloading gear in silence. The exhaustion of battle was settling in now, a heavy weight that slowed every step. Parker dropped onto a bench, letting out a long breath. "That was a mess," he muttered. "But we lived," Rivera said, sitting across from him. "Barely," Parker replied. He glanced at Briggs, who stood in the corner, stripping his rifle with methodical precision. "Boss, you ever gonna tell us what's going on with that pilot?" Briggs didn't look up. "When I know, you'll know." Garrison, cleaning his saw, chuckled dryly. "So never." Later that night, long after his men had turned in, Briggs found himself back at the airstrip. The same Warthog sat alone in the corner, gleaming faintly under the floodlights. There was no sign of the mechanic, no movement at all. Briggs approached cautiously, circling the jet. He reached up, testing the cockpit canopy. "Lock tight." He ran his fingers over the fuselage, noting the fresh scratches and scorch marks that hadn't been there earlier. Whoever flew this bird tonight had returned it to base in silence, like a ghost slipping back into the shadows. Briggs crouched, spotting something tucked under the landing gear, a small, sealed envelope. His pulse quickened as he picked it up, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. The envelope was blank, no markings, but inside was a single folded note. He unfolded it, reading the short, precise message. "You weren't supposed to be there tonight. Stay out of Delta Sector. Next time I won't cover you." Briggs read it twice, jaw tightening. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. Whoever this pilot was, they weren't a random savior. They had their own agenda, and they didn't want his team interfering. He burned the note in an oil drum behind the hangar, watching the paper curl and blacken. This wasn't a message for command. This was personal. At dawn, Briggs briefed his squad. "We're standing down for the next 48 hours, he told them. "No patrols outside the perimeter. No unauthorized scouting." "Standing down?" Parker asked, incredulous. "After what happened last night?" Briggs's expression was unreadable. "Orders." Rivera exchanged a look with Garrison, then nodded. Harris just stared at Briggs, sensing there was more he wasn't saying. That night, as the squad rested, Briggs stood alone at the perimeter wall, watching the horizon. The desert stretched endlessly before him, quiet and deceptively calm. Somewhere out there, a pilot with no name and no allegiance had chosen to save them, then warned them to back off. Briggs lit a cigarette, the ember glowing in the darkness. "Who the hell are you?" he muttered. The night offered no answer. But in the distance, just at the edge of hearing, came the faint hum of jet engines. The base was unusually quiet the following morning, the kind of quiet that didn't feel like peace but like the pause between storms. Briggs sat alone in the mess hall, coffee steaming in front of him, his eyes locked on a map projected onto his datapad. Delta Sector. The ambush site. The coordinates lined with red dots, marking where enemy fighters had been stationed, where his team had nearly been wiped out. It was no coincidence. Someone had leaked their patrol route. He took a slow sip of coffee, scanning every detail. The jet's appearance, the precision of its strikes, the anonymous warning note. None of it made sense. Whoever the pilot was, they had access to the kind of intelligence only a high-level operative or rogue insider could possess. Briggs's thoughts were interrupted by Rivera sliding into the seat across from him. "Morning, sir," Rivera said, looking just as tired as Briggs felt. "Been staring at that map for 2 hours now. You see something I don't?" Briggs didn't look up. "I see too much. That ambush wasn't random. We were meant to die out there." Rivera's jaw tightened. "You think we've got a mole?" Briggs finally glanced up, his piercing eyes hard. "I think we've got a whole damn nest of them." Later, Briggs convened his squad in a small briefing room. The men sat at the table, tension thick in the air. Parker leaned back in his chair, boots propped up, while Harris sat stiffly, his hands folded in his lap. Garrison was silent, cleaning his weapon despite Briggs's strict weapons stowed policy during briefings. Briggs stood at the head of the table, arms folded. "What happened in Delta Sector doesn't leave this room. Not a word to command, not a word to other units. We were set up. That much is clear." Harris's eyes widened. "Sir, you're saying our own people?" "I'm saying somebody knew our exact route, the timing, and the fact that we'd be light on backup," Briggs interrupted sharply. "That doesn't happen by accident." Parker scoffed. "And what about our guardian angel in the sky? That doesn't exactly scream coincidence either." Rivera leaned forward. "Whoever that pilot is, they didn't just save us out of the goodness of their heart. They had an agenda. The question is, are we pawns in it?" Briggs nodded slowly. "That's exactly the question." The room fell silent. Outside, the wind howled faintly across the desert. "All right," Briggs continued, his voice low and controlled. "I'm launching an off-the-books investigation. Rivera, you're with me. Parker, Garrison, you'll hold the fort here and act like nothing's wrong. Harris?" "Yes, sir?" "Keep your head down. Listen more than you talk. You're good at that." Harris nodded, both honored and uneasy. Briggs and Rivera began their investigation in the only place they could, the hangars. The airstrip was busy, engineers and mechanics working on drones and transports. Yet the corner where the mysterious warthog sat was eerily empty. Briggs approached the jet, running a hand along its cool metal surface. "No ID numbers, no markings," Rivera muttered. "This thing's practically a ghost." Briggs crouched near the landing gear, examining the scorched metal. "Fresh heat damage. Whoever flew her last night brought her in hot. But there's something else," he pointed to faint residue near the exhaust. "That stealth coating. High grade. The kind they stopped issuing 5 years ago." Rivera frowned. "So this thing's running Black Ops tech. Old Black Ops tech." Briggs nodded grimly. "Somebody doesn't want to be seen." They slipped away from the hangar before anyone could notice their interest. Next stop, the control tower. Briggs used his clearance to pull flight logs from the previous night. Rows of data filled the screen, takeoffs, landings, drone patrol schedules, but not a single record of a warthog sortie. Rivera glanced at him. "They scrubbed it." "Not scrubbed," Briggs said, leaning closer. "Never logged. This bird isn't on the books." Rivera blew out a slow breath. "Who has the power to make a jet disappear like this?" Briggs stared at the blank space on the log, his jaw tight. "Somebody who knows exactly how this base runs. Somebody who's been here a long time." That night, Briggs decided to visit the hangar again alone. The jet was still there, gleaming under dim lights. He circled it like a predator stalking prey, his instincts screaming that he was being watched. "Looking for something, Commander?" The voice was calm, female, and came from the shadows. Briggs spun, hand instinctively dropping to the sidearm at his hip. A woman stepped forward, dressed in a mechanic's jumpsuit, a cap pulled low over her face. But her posture wasn't that of a mechanic, it was too precise, too disciplined. She carried herself like someone who'd spent years in combat. "Who are you?" Briggs demanded. "Someone who saved your life," she said evenly. "And someone you should be thanking by leaving this alone." Briggs narrowed his eyes. "You think I'm just going to walk away after someone tried to kill my men?" "You were warned," she replied, her voice steady but cold. "Delta Sector is off limits for a reason. You dig any deeper, you won't like what you find." Briggs took a step closer. "Then try me." For a moment they stared at each other, tension crackling in the air. Then she smirked faintly. "You've got guts, Commander. I'll give you that. But guts get people killed. Walk away." And just like that she melted back into the shadows. Briggs moved quickly, but by the time he reached the corner where she'd stood, she was gone. No doors opening, no footsteps. Gone. The next day Briggs's squad was ordered to remain on base again, but Briggs couldn't sit still. He gathered Rivera and briefed him on the encounter. "She's ex-military," Briggs said. "Special forces, maybe intel. Knows her way around this place better than we do." Rivera rubbed his jaw. "So what's the plan? We hunting her?" Briggs shook his head. "No. She wants us alive for now. We need to figure out why." That evening, Briggs requested a recon drone feed from Delta Sector under the pretense of reviewing enemy movement. Hours of footage flickered across his screen. Burned-out buildings, enemy vehicles moving in convoys, heat signatures of fighters hiding in ruins. But then something caught his eye. A single-frame blip, an aircraft hovering in the distance, cloaked but not invisible to thermal. He zoomed in. The shape was unmistakable, the Warthog. Briggs's blood ran cold. The pilot hadn't just been helping them, she'd been monitoring the entire battle, watching every move. At midnight, Briggs met Rivera in a quiet corner of the base. "She's not just some rogue pilot," Briggs said, handing him a tablet with the thermal image. "She's running an operation out there. And whoever she is, she's got command-level clearance to fly under the radar." Rivera studied the image, his expression grim. "You think she's tied to whoever set us up?" Briggs exhaled slowly. "No. I think she's fighting them. Alone." Rivera looked up sharply. "Then why the warning? Why tell us to stay away?" Briggs's eyes hardened. "Because she thinks we're a liability. And maybe she's right." The next morning a new order came down. Briggs's squad was to resume patrols, but not near Delta Sector. Instead they'd be sweeping an area farther north. Briggs knew better. This wasn't random reassignment, it was containment. Someone wanted them distracted. As they geared up, Briggs slipped the tablet with the drone footage into his vest. The pilot was trying to warn him off, but Briggs wasn't about to walk away. Whoever had orchestrated the ambush had powerful allies. If the ghost pilot was working against them, then she wasn't just a rogue asset, she was the only ally they had. And Briggs wasn't going to let her fight this war alone. The night sky over Delta Sector was blacker than ink, the only light coming from the distant flashes of artillery and the faint glint of stars. Briggs crouched low in the scrub, his squad fanned out in a tight formation behind him. This was not a sanctioned mission. If command found out they were out here, they'd be labeled deserters or worse. But Briggs didn't care. Too many questions, too many dead friends. Tonight they'd find answers. "Parker, you've got rear watch," Briggs whispered into his comm. "Rivera with me? Harris, Garrison, cover the East Ridge. If anything moves, I want to know before it breathes twice." "Copy that, boss," Rivera murmured, scanning the horizon through night vision goggles. Ahead lay the ruins of an abandoned outpost, half swallowed by sand and time. According to drone intel, this was where enemy reinforcements were massing. But Briggs wasn't here to ambush them. He was hunting something else. They moved like shadows through the ruins, weapons raised, hearts pounding. The air smelled of burnt fuel and ozone, a reminder of the firefight that had nearly killed them days ago. Briggs halted, raising a fist. Rivera froze beside him. Something was wrong. A faint hum drifted through the night, the unmistakable low growl of a jet engine idling in stealth mode. Briggs crouched, motioning Rivera to follow. They slipped between crumbling walls until they found it, the Warthog. Parked in a shallow depression, cloaked by camouflage netting. Its fuselage gleamed faintly under moonlight, and crouched beside it was the woman in the mechanic's jumpsuit. She wasn't alone. Two heavily armed figures flanked her, both wearing unmarked black gear. Their movements were crisp, professional. They weren't insurgents, they were special ops. and they were pointing rifles at her. Briggs didn't hesitate. He raised his rifle, finger poised on the trigger. "Drop it," he barked, stepping out from cover. The woman's head snapped toward him, her eyes widening. The black-clad soldiers swung their weapons in his direction, but Rivera fired first, dropping one with a single shot. Briggs's burst of gunfire took out the second. The clearing fell silent, save for the echo of shots. "Briggs," the woman hissed, fury flashing in her eyes. "You shouldn't be here." "Neither should they," Briggs retorted, scanning the bodies. "Who are they?" "Kill squad," she said bluntly, holstering a pistol. "Sent to take me out before I got to you." Briggs stepped closer. "Then start talking. Who set us up in Delta Sector?" The woman studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "Name's Callahan. Former Intel Division, Shadow Ops. I've been tracking a black flag operation embedded in your chain of command. They're moving weapons, selling intel to the highest bidder. Your squad was collateral. Someone needed a distraction." Rivera cursed under his breath. "So we're pawns in someone's side hustle." "Not a side hustle," Callahan corrected grimly. "A full-blown shadow war." Before Briggs could respond, a drone's red targeting laser danced across the ground near his boots. He dove for cover as a missile slammed into the clearing, sending fire and debris into the air. "Contact!" Parker shouted over comms. "Multiple bogies inbound, 3 clicks east." "Squad, fall back." Briggs roared, dragging Rivera behind a wall. Callahan sprinted toward the Warthog, her movements smooth and precise. She vaulted into the cockpit and powered up the engines. Briggs fired at advancing figures cresting the ridge, more black-clad soldiers. Whoever was behind this wasn't holding back. "Get in." Callahan shouted over the roar of turbines. Briggs hesitated only a second before signaling his men. One by one they piled into the Warthog's cramped cargo bay. Callahan yanked the throttle, and the jet roared skyward just as a volley of rockets streaked past, exploding against the ruins. The Warthog tore through the night, skimming treetops at breakneck speed. Briggs braced himself in the bay, gripping a handrail. "Where the hell are you taking us?" he demanded over the comm system. "Somewhere safe," Callahan replied, her hands steady on the controls. "We're out of time. They've marked all of you for elimination." "Who's they?" Parker growled, checking his rifle. Callahan's jaw tightened. "Your commanding officer, Colonel Hayes. He's been running this op for months. The ambush in Delta Sector was supposed to tie up loose ends. I intervened." Rivera swore. "Hayes? The guy who's been barking at us about loyalty and discipline?" "The same," Callahan said flatly. "He's selling intel on troop movements, drone schematics and weapons caches to the insurgents. You stumbled onto one of his smuggling routes. That's why you're all dead men walking." Briggs's blood boiled. "Then we stop him. Tonight." Callahan shot him a glance. "You're not equipped for this." "Lady, I've buried too many good men because of traitors like Hayes," Briggs snarled. "We're ending this." Callahan hesitated, then nodded sharply. "Fine. But we do it my way." An hour later, the Warthog touched down on a remote plateau overlooking the base. From here, the entire airstrip was visible, bathed in floodlights. Callahan spread a hollow map on the deck, pointing to a secure hangar. "That's his nest. Hayes runs everything from there. He's got a private security detail and full control of comms. We cut his uplink, isolate him and take him alive. Evidence is inside that hangar." Briggs studied the map. "Sounds like a death sentence." "Only if you miss your shots," Callahan said, flashing a wry smile. The raid was quick, brutal and silent. Callahan moved like a ghost, her suppressed pistol dropping guards with surgical precision. Rivera and Garrison covered flanks while Briggs and Harris breached the hangar doors. Inside they found Hayes seated at a terminal, flanked by 2 mercenaries. The colonel didn't even flinch. "Commander Briggs," Hayes said smoothly as though greeting an old friend. "You should be on patrol." "Cut the act," Briggs growled, leveling his rifle. "It's over." Hayes chuckled. "You think this ends with me? You're a soldier, Briggs. You know better." Before Briggs could respond, Hayes reached for a detonator on his desk. Callahan's shot was faster, shattering the device and grazing Hayes's hand. "Alive?" she warned coldly. Hayes sneered but didn't resist as Briggs tackled him, zip-tying his wrists. Rivera accessed the terminal, pulling encrypted files onto a drive. "Got it," Rivera said. "Enough evidence to bury him in half the brass." "Good," Briggs said, hauling Hayes to his feet. "Let's go." By dawn, the base was swarming with military police. Hayes was dragged away in cuffs, screaming about orders from above and classified operations. Briggs watched him go, exhaustion etched into his face. Callahan approached, arms crossed. You've made powerful enemies tonight. That evidence won't keep you safe forever. Briggs gave a tired smirk. We'll manage. She studied him for a moment. You're a stubborn man, Briggs. And you're a hell of a pilot, he replied. So what now? Callahan glanced toward the horizon, where the rising sun bathed the desert in gold. Now I disappear. Too many people want me dead. But if you ever need me, she handed him a small encrypted comm chip. You'll know how to reach me. Briggs took it, nodding. Thanks for saving my squad. Her lips curved into a faint smile. Don't make me regret it. With that, she climbed into the Warthog. Moments later, the jet roared into the sky, vanishing like a ghost. Rivera stepped up beside Briggs, watching the jet disappear. Think we'll see her again? Briggs slid the comm chip into his pocket, eyes fixed on the horizon. Count on it. The sun rose higher, casting long shadows over the base. For the first time in days, Briggs felt a sense of calm. The fight wasn't over. If anything, this was just the beginning. But his squad was alive and Hayes was in chains. That was enough for now. All right, boys, Briggs said, turning to his team. Let's get some rest. We've earned it. They walked back toward the barracks, weary but unbroken as the Warthog became a distant glint in the morning sky. The end.